Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I'm your host, Wendy McCallum, and I'm excited to be here today with Ally Garber. Hi, Ally.
How are you?
I'm so great. I'm so excited about this conversation we're going to have. We have so many things in common. Let me tell you a little bit about Allison, though, before we get started. So Ally Garber is the owner of Ally Garber Communications. And in recent years, a lot of Ally's work is centered around supporting various mental health initiatives and strategies, including the launch of a mental health website for Nova Scotia's first responders, a suite of online mental health services for Nova Scotia's post-secondary students, and developing a mental health action plan for Nova Scotia's farmers. Ally has also established herself as a vocal advocate on issues pertaining to mental health and addiction, appearing on CTV's primetime special for Bell Let's Talk Day and sharing her story with CBC's Now or Never radio program and Silken Lauman's Unsinkable project. Recently, Ally shared her story on CBC's The National in a piece called Why Some Women Are Pushing Back Against Alcohol and the Wine to Unwind Culture. And that is what made me think I need to reach out to Ally. So Ally and I have been in the same circles now for a long time, and we have a lot of people in common in our networks, but we've never actually sat down and had a face-to-face, which we're doing just over Zoom today. So I'm just really excited to have this conversation because, as I said, there are so many similarities in our stories, and I'm looking forward to kind of learning more about your story, Ally, and also exploring the similarities and the differences and just, giving our listeners another opportunity to learn through shared story, which is my favorite way to help affect change. So thanks again for being here.
So happy to be here. And I echo your comments. I have been a huge admirer of your work and of your podcast. So it's a real thrill to be here. And I also joked with you right before we started recording that it's nice to just talk to another adult after being in Nova Scotia lockdown, online schooling.
I know. We're both back in full lockdown again. And I spend my days talking to people all over the place. The women that I work with live everywhere. And a lot of them live in the States or in other countries where they're no longer in lockdown. So I'm just living vicariously through everyone else. And it's giving me some hope. And
I know we'll get there.
The sun's finally shining today, Ally, which is nice because it's been crappy.
It is.
For a week, it's been crappy. Okay, so I would love it. Allison, you're sober. You've been alcohol-free for how long now?
It will be 3 years, October 1st.
Awesome.
So a little over 2.5 years.
Well, Congratulations on that. That is no small deal. Would you maybe start by telling us your story around alcohol? So how you got to the place where you started to think this isn't good anymore, and maybe something needs to change. And then maybe just take us through what that looked like for you, the decision to make a change in your relationship with alcohol and how you did that and got to where you are today.
Sure. My relationship with alcohol is interesting. Since getting sober, I've almost been doing like this post-mortem on where it all went wrong. I think like a lot of people who experience anxiety or maybe socially awkward, I discovered quite early that alcohol allowed me to be a little bit more outgoing, fun, definitely more relaxed, lessened any concerns or worries I had in social settings. And I think that's pretty common, right? I mean, that's kind of what it does in social settings. But if I look back, which I have been, definitely problematic behavior around alcohol started super early. And at that point, I definitely was what we call binge drinking. So as a, young university student, taking it, to the max on the weekends, studying all week, then kind of the cycle continued. It wasn't until my 20s and 30s that my relationship with alcohol shifted into what I see now was absolutely self-medicating behavior. So when I was in my early 20s, I interned in Toronto on my own. I didn't know anybody there, for an incredible public relations boutique firm. But I struggled. This was during the SARS crisis in Toronto. And, I was having incredible anxiety, and I was really exhibiting strange behaviors. And by this, I mean, I had a lot of obsessive thoughts, and I had a lot of compulsions that if I don't do X, then something bad's going to happen. So an example of this is I had a place in North York, and I would catch the subway at Mel Latsman Square. And if I didn't count the right steps to get there, I'd have to go back and start again. So I kind of figured maybe I should talk to somebody about this. And I did. I went to see a psychologist. And that's when I learned that I did have generalized anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, which is really news to me. I don't know why, but I kind of thought like, this is totally normal behavior. Who doesn't fish out recycling from garbages because something bad's going to happen, but apparently not everyone. So I think we know a lot more about these disorders today than we did then. Back then there weren't as many pharmaceutical options, for example, and there were a lot of severe risks with some of the pharmaceutical options. And certainly the one I was first given impacted me negatively. It actually kind of led me into a depression. So I really struggled throughout my 20s, but you would not have known it because, well, I'm sure some people knew, but I'm not completely oblivious. But I held down a full-time job. When I moved back home, I was living in an apartment on Argyle Street. By all accounts, I was, a fully functioning young adult PR career woman, but I had no power in the apartment I was living in. I was using the money I had to buy a bottle of wine and sit in my apartment, and was just in such a deep depression. And all I could really have the energy to do at the end of the day was just kind of follow through on these obsessive thoughts and, engage in the compulsive behavior. So, I did finally level out. I don't know if that's the best term, but I was put on medication that really greatly helped and did change things for the better for me. And that did lessen my drinking. And I settled down in my 30s, got married, or in my late 20s, early 30s, got married, had 2 children. Alcohol was not an issue at that point. But slowly, with the stressors of being a full-time business owner, I have a communications consultancy, raising 2 children. My oldest has a disability, which, does add in a society and an environment that is not always accessible. It requires a lot of advocacy work, which he deserves. He deserves that advocacy effort, but it's tiring and exhausting and kind of demoralizing for the entire family that you have to put in that fight for equal rights. So long way of saying I dealt with the stressors as a lot of women do. You see the memes everywhere, and you and I've had this conversation of, you're the reason mommy drinks on Mother's Day cards, and the images all over social media of the women in the bubble bath with a glass of wine beside her. It's seen almost as an equal coping tool to yoga or eating well or drinking lots of water. It's just kind of part and parcel of motherhood and parenthood, and I bought into that. And I've said before that sort of environment and belief system allowed me to hide my problem in plain sight, and allowed me to, I guess, disassociate from what I thought an alcoholic was. I had this image of somebody who was not holding down a job, who was not kind of quote unquote functioning as a parent, etc. And, it allowed me to think that I was actually fitting in with the rest of the women in my social group.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That totally resonates with me. I've talked about that before on this podcast, but I think it's a topic absolutely worth talking about again and again. Just the normalization of drinking for moms, especially. I mean, the normalization of drinking for busy, hardworking women is out there, but in the mom community, it's huge. And Ally and I were actually talking before the podcast because I was listening this morning to one of my favorite podcasts, which is Armchair Expert. And they were interviewing Prince Harry, and he was talking about mental health initiatives. And one of the things, I think in the context of the thought that I'm going to share in a second was around hate speech, hate messaging. And anyway, I thought that Prince Harry actually made a really great point. He was talking about how maybe the better way to approach this is, instead of trying to shut down all the hate speech, is to just stop sharing it, because it's really a simple supply and demand issue. And as I was walking this morning, listening to this podcast, knowing I was going to talk to Ally today, was thinking, this is a really great perspective on this mummy wine culture thing. Maybe what we need to be saying is, instead of, shaming and judging and criticizing the women who are posting these memes, because to be perfectly honest, I was doing it. I mean, I have no judgment or criticism over women who were doing
the worst offender. Yeah. Over here. Yeah.
I was absolutely sharing these things and talking this way because it just like you, Ally, it made me feel better about my own drinking, and I feel like I was just doing what everybody else was doing. And unfortunately, that kept me stuck in a habit that was not serving me at all for probably way too long, way longer than it needed to. And so anyway, what he was saying, Prince Harry, I cannot believe I'm quoting my friend, my BFF, Prince Harry. Yeah, he was saying that maybe the better approach to this stuff, to really make significant change, is to just start focusing in on the not sharing part of it. And so that's what I wanted to kind of raise today, this idea of, when you see these memes in your feed, just don't share them. Don't like them, don't share them, don't comment on them. And the more we do that as women and mums, the less this traction this stuff is going to get. That's just the truth of it. And hopefully, and I think this has happened for me because they don't show up anymore in my feed. So I think the algorithm is also going to recognize that, the master algorithm with a capital A. It's like I think of it as like the Wizard of Oz, like behind the curtain. I don't know what the algorithm looks like, but it's very powerful and all knowing. Anyway, hopefully the algorithm will not we'll keep this stuff out of our feeds as well. So anyway, just a total side note.
No, it's good. And I mean, and I think at the peak of me struggling, which was, the couple years before I did get sober, I really embraced that culture because it did make me feel better about myself. It made me feel as though I was not alone in needing that clutch at the end of the day, that, I am not the only one who's buying boxed wine instead of bottles of wine. And like, no other drug do you kind of speak so nonchalantly about as we do about alcohol, like making a joke about, I buy boxes because then, it's the box of no accountability, right? You can't tell how much is like being taken from the bottle when you're using a box. And, so I was that person on Facebook sharing those posts. I was that person on Instagram. And it's interesting because when I did get sober, it was very strange for me to not talk about it. Like it was I don't know what you went through, but I struggled with what people were going to think. I had a lot of shame about it. It took me a while to shed that. But at around 6 months sober, I spoke to my sponsor. I'm in a recovery program. And I said, this doesn't feel authentic. Like I feel as though so much about me has changed. I just feel like a different person. I think I need to talk about this because I was that mom on Facebook and people are like still sending me these memes. And I was like, oh my God, it just was so cringeworthy. I think after I got sober too, and when I started to become more vocal, I was definitely like the wine mom post narc, just like, how dare you? I was really angry. And I think that's a natural, it's almost like a grief process. There's like a sobriety process. And when you're so raw, you're almost angry, and you lash out at the culture for being the way it is.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry in a lot of ways because it does negatively impact women. And I think that when we focus so much on those messages, we're not, I believe in personal choice. Of course, I believe that women should be able to have access to alcohol and have a glass of wine. Majority of my friends are able to do that in moderation with no problem. But I do think it should be an informed choice. I think that they should understand that these are the risks associated with. This is what an actual serving looks like. So that again, they're educated and informed, and that's getting lost in all of the overwhelming talk about, numbing your senses and self-care with wine.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like there's a balance that's missing there. So there's no conversation on the other side. So that's
right.
really, big piece of my mission as a human being, as a alcohol-free woman, as a podcaster and coach, is to normalize the discussion on the other side of it, because no one shares when they're struggling. Nobody's posting on Instagram or Facebook that they are worried that maybe they're, one glass of wine has turned into 3, and that's not great. Nobody talks about that. So we only see the side of it through social media. Again, that damn algorithm. But what we see, we see all of the normalization of drinking, as opposed to having the real conversation that needs to be happening around what the other side of that looks like, which is you and me and so many other millions of women out there who are struggling with their relationship with alcohol. So, but again, me and Prince Harry have this new way of thinking about it, which is maybe we just need to be really, because what he was saying basically, just to take it one step further, is when we share it and make a comment about how this is not appropriate, we're just putting that message, we're just perpetuating the message, right? Even if we're saying like, we don't agree with this, giving it airtime. And maybe the more powerful thing to do is to just give it no airtime. Now, I still believe it's important to advocate for the balance and to share the other side of the story, but it was just kind of a different take on the whole mummy wine culture thing.
I do feel though, and I don't know if you see the same, certainly within, my direct friend group and community and network, I've gotten a lot of great feedback in terms of it's made people think about the impact of sharing those, that who is going to be on the receiving end. And perhaps it is somebody that is struggling, or perhaps it is somebody that doesn't need to have this sort of normalized or joked about, etc. And so I think that, and I like that, I believe that we need to have more of that mindset when it comes to many things across social media, is to be more thoughtful in terms of, do I really know what I'm sharing? Like, do I have all the information available, and who is this going to impact? So I think that is shifting. I'm definitely, certainly while you say nobody kind of shares their suffering, they don't on their public news feed, but I definitely notice it in my direct messages and emails that people are reaching out being like, you've made me think. And that is, to your point, the power of telling stories. I do feel as though I would not be where I am today if it hadn't have been for incredible women like Ann Dowsett Johnston and Laura McCohen, who shared their stories that I related to and I saw myself within. And they were so brave to open themselves up and say, this was messy. What you saw was this tidy, beautiful Pinterest board of a life, but it was really, really messy. And I'm going to expose that for you so that you don't feel alone. And I think that is how we heal, is by bringing those stories out of the darkness and shining them into the light, because it's a far greater problem than we realize.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And I've said that before on the podcast about the whole be thoughtful of who's seeing what you're posting thing. Knowing the statistics that I know around women and drinking, I know that there are many, many people who see the things you post who are struggling with alcohol, many, many women who are struggling with it. So I think that's a really great point. And I absolutely agree on the shared story thing, which is, of course, the main reason why I have you on this podcast. So let's get back to the shared story. You kind of
paused.
Yeah, so you found yourself drinking more than you wanted to. You were kind of justifying that partially with what you were seeing and the conversation that seemed to be happening all around you that was saying this was normal. What was the moment where you thought to yourself, something needs to change here? This actually isn't okay. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So I do. And I think when I talk about my story, I can't talk about mental health without talking about addiction. I can't talk about addiction without talking about mental health, because for me, they were absolutely merged together. I was struggling deeply with my anxiety, with OCD, and what was happening is that I was just elevated to a level of stress where I was just kind of drinking more and more to be able to try to numb myself, to be able to try to find some relief from the anxiety and the increased OCD symptoms. And what happened was kind of when everything came to a head, my mother had been sick with cancer for 10 years, really. She had gone through kind of, started with breast cancer, then endometrial cancer. And then a few years before her passing, we found out that it had come back. It was in her lymph nodes. And, it was going to kind of progressively get worse. But it metastasized in her brain in June of 2018. That's when we found that out. And we found out that she was terminal. And she only had, at that point, they said 6 months to live. But she ended up, as she always does, exceeding expectations and was going to be with us for almost a year after that. But I absolutely spiraled out of control. I did not know how to handle that news. It's interesting because, if I look back, I was certainly there for her and trying to do everything, but I wasn't fully present. I was very lost, lashing out at people. And it wasn't until I had this sense of clarity, and I don't think you can ever really properly articulate those moments when you have these life-changing moments. Well, I think other people, Dax Shepard actually can. So, but for me, I just had this really powerful realization of you are probably one step away from impacting your career, impacting your marriage, screwing up your kids. You are no longer holding it together. Like there's no semblance of holding it together anymore. And I made this life-changing decision to reach out to a friend who I knew was in recovery. And I said, I think I'm struggling. I think I have a problem and I'm hoping you can help. And once I had put it out there, for me at least, it's like, you can't take that back. I cannot pretend that never happened. And it was the almost sense of accountability that I needed. And this is somebody that I wasn't even close with, but I felt like she knew, like I've admitted that I have a problem and she knew. And anyways, that was what started the ball rolling. That was September 31st. Is that the day before October 1st? I don't know. Anyways, on October 1st, I woke up, went to the library, took out a number of books on recovery, which is obviously what people do the first day they get sober, and wrestled through those first few weeks. And that was it. That was the start of my journey into sobriety. And of course, there's a lot to talk about during that first year, but I am forever grateful that I made that decision because I was there for every step of my mom's final year. I was fully present with her, and we had deep, meaningful conversations to the very end. And it makes me very proud to know that she had me by her side during, a very scary journey for her. And I that is a gift. It's a real gift to me. And I don't know if you believe in kind of higher powers or guiding forces. I didn't before. I think I do now, because there was something that intervened to let me know that, you're not holding it together at all anymore. And you are going to kind of waste the rest of your life going down this path. So yeah, it was that's kind of, I didn't have what many describe as a kind of pivotal rock bottom. For me, my rock bottom was that moment where I realized I had two paths in front of me. One was not going to be a good one. It was not going to be a good end to my story. The other, I didn't know what it looked like, but I knew it definitely held more opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's so crazy to me, the commonalities in our stories. We've talked about this outside of this podcast, and I've shared this on the podcast before. I had a very similar situation where my dad had gotten very, very ill, and we thought he was going to die, but then he recovered. And I mean, that's a very loose term. He didn't really recover, but he survived. And then we were told that at some point he only had 12 months max to live. And at that point I was still drinking, and I kind of reached that same point where it just felt like, I was of two minds about it, which is just with such clear cognitive dissonance, obviously, that I had going on around it. But part of me was just felt like wine was so important for me to be able to cope and get through this thing. And another part of me was just done with it. Like there was a part of me that was just sick of it. I was just sick of my own stuff. And
I know it's like that, always that excuse of like,
Yeah.
well, if there's any time to drink wine, it's now. Like, you know,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, people were bringing me wine. People are like,
Yes.
oh, you
Yes.
must need a drink, you know? And I'm like, you know, had just gotten to that point where I have no other way to describe it. It is hard to articulate, but I was just done.
Yeah.
I just thought, I don't even want this thing that I want so badly. I don't
People
want
say tired of being tired. And I think that's so apt. Like I was tired of being tired. I was tired of fighting.
I was tired of thinking about drinking. I was tired of being tired. And I also had this real moment of clarity where I realized I could sustain this for the next 12 months while my dad dies. But what is that going to look like for me? And what's it going to look like for my relationship with him? And how am I going to feel about this when it's all over? And I just, you know, and I don't know if it was that clear. I don't know if it was that clear a conversation in my head, but the biggest motivating factor for the timing of my decision to really try to go alcohol free was that my dad had 12 months left to live and I wanted to be there for it. And I agree with you. Same as you. It was the absolute biggest gift I could have given myself was to stop drinking and to actually be there. And it was not all good. And I'm sure it's the same thing with your mom. There were lots of incredibly difficult days and weeks and moments in all of it. But there were also some really incredible moments of connection. Even, and my dad had a form of dementia called Lewy body dementia. And it's kind of a weird dementia in that it's completely unpredictable. And it's also like he had a lot of stuff he still had locked away in his brain and he could access it, but then he would get very muddled and confused about other things. And there was also a hallucinatory component to it. So you never really knew what you were going to get when you were over there.
Yeah.
But some days I'd go over there and he would be completely lucid and we would have a conversation and I'd think, this is a total gift. I did not think I was going to get this other, you know, this next conversation with my dad. And, you know, and then there were also lots of like moments of laughter and just, you know, fun that we had that they just would not have been available to me. I've said this I think on the podcast before, if I had still been drinking, I would have been there every day anyway, because I was there almost every day, but I would have been thinking to myself, I can't wait till I can get home and have a glass of wine.
And go. Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
I thought about that when I was sitting in hospice with my mom in her final weeks. It's just, I would be anxious about when I could go home and pour a glass of wine. And that's the reality. It really is. It's so sad to say, but you talked about feelings and you're right. That year, I mean, my gosh, anybody who's experienced the loss of someone they love, someone they're close to, a parent, you know, knows that it's just such a phenomenal kind of emotional experience where it's the highest of highs, lowest of lows. And I felt it all. And that's kind of being sober. You're not able to numb yourself. There's no kind of putting a warm blanket over those emotions to try to suffocate them at all. You're raw, and especially in early sobriety. And so I felt everything. And I am so grateful for feeling like when I felt absolutely broken. But I also felt incredible elation, you know, to have these moments with my mom where we'd go on drives and where we shared laughter and just even kind of being able to fully appreciate the small details of a moment, you know, and I have so many of them that I journal, like small little details I never would have remembered. But that's the beauty about sobriety, is that you have to kind of figure out how to live with yourself, right? Instead of constantly running. And I felt like I was constantly running away from myself, which is ironic because running is actually something that has saved me. But I did, like, you know, because it's very hard to learn how to sit with your feelings. But, you know, the other thing about getting sober and talking about, you know, tired of being tired is that something else kind of came when all this was happening, was that I realized I had spent and invested so much energy in trying to moderate and like, why can't this work? Why can't I just have one on the weekend? Or why can't I just, like, it was just this constant battle that I was fighting harder to keep alcohol in my life than I was fighting to be my best self. Like, that was wild to me, you know, like I was fighting so hard to keep this thing that was literally killing me in my life. And I was scared too, because it is like your best friend until you realize it's absolutely not.
Isn't that crazy? I know.
Yeah.
I did I had a note here. Anyone listening to this podcast knows I never actually use my notes, so it's all over the place. I did actually have a note about talking, because I wanted to talk about moderation with you, because I think, that's a game that we play with ourselves for a long time. I was in like full moderation game for probably 3 years before I decided to just try not maybe just leave some room open for the possibility that my life might actually be better without it at all.
Yeah.
I wasn't even willing to entertain that thought for years. And I was just confident that I could moderate this and just come up with some systems and rules. And I made rules about how often I was going to drink, when I was going to drink, how much I was going to drink, who I was going to drink with, where I was going to drink. I had a million rules over those 3 years, and I could keep them for a few days.
A few days. Yeah.
Sometimes
and then there's always something, right? It's like,
but then there's book club. What am I going to do with book club?
No, totally. There's no way you can read the book without solving up long. Yeah.
Shout out to my book club girls. I've been going to book club. I mean, this is a good example of how we make up these stories in our head, right?
That's right.
Something like book club to me, I was like, oh, that's going to be really difficult to negotiate. Well, I actually stopped drinking, and it was a year before. I went to book club every month with the same group of girls. And it was a year after I'd stopped drinking before someone noticed I wasn't drinking and said, "Are you not drinking?" And I said, "No, I'm not." "Oh, why?" I said, "I don't know. I stopped drinking a year ago and I haven't." And they're like, "What?" So, I had made it up to be this massive thing in my head, but actually nobody was paying any attention, and they definitely didn't care, because I've been going to book club, since then, and don't drink. So, but yeah, anyway, back to the moderation thing. We make all of these rules up for ourselves. And I often have people ask me, how did you know it was a problem? How did you know it was a problem? Or did you think you were an alcoholic? My answer to that question, by the way, is no. And you may be on a different page from me on that, but I don't like the word alcoholic. It's not my favorite term. I think that it serves a lot of people. So it's great if it serves you and it got you where you want to be with alcohol and sobriety. Fantastic. But for a lot of the women that I work with, that term keeps people stuck in drinking because they don't identify with it. It's a barrier to entry into being alcohol-free or sober for them. They feel like they have to fit the definition in order to ask for help and make a change. And so I generally don't use the word alcoholic, but people ask me a lot, were you an alcoholic or are you an alcoholic? My answer is no. And the reason I say that is because I don't think that's the right question.
I love this. Yeah. I know where you're going. And it's not. It's not.
I really think the only question that matters is this serving me anymore?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is this, and I always say, like, instead of asking yourself, is this bad enough to quit? Which is kind of for me, trying to slot yourself into a category of drinkers approach.
Right.
Instead of asking yourself, like, is this bad enough yet for me to actually have to quit, have to give it up? Ask yourself, is this life good enough? Like, is this life that I'm living right now with alcohol in it? Is this good enough? Do I deserve more than this? Might there be something better out there for me? And I also say, like, if you're asking yourself whether you have a problem, you probably have a problem. So if you're having a discussion,
I love that. Yeah. And I've heard that before. And it's so true. People who don't have a problem with alcohol don't think about
it all the time. And if you're making up these crazy rules for yourself, like I did for 3 years, it's become a problem, whether you technically qualify as an alcoholic or not, right? Yeah. The fact that you're thinking about it all the time and making up all these rules for yourself, it's not serving you anymore. And really what it came down to for me with the moderation thing is I was like, God damn it. All I do is think about drinking. I think whether I should drink tonight, when I drink last, how much I'm going to drink tonight. If what I drank last night was too much.
What excuse I'm going to make to my husband about why I'm drinking tonight.
Exactly. How am I going to, when am I going to get to drink? I have to drive the kids here. I have to get this done. When am I going to get to have, like, the amount of time and space that was consumed by my brain with drinking is insane. In fact, I have a tracker. I don't know if you used a tracker, but I used a day tracker as a tool. I found it helpful. Some people don't find tracking days helpful at all. And it's not something that I recommend all my clients do. We kind of do case by case approach to it.
Yeah.
I use this tracker. I'm going to pull it up right now because it's going to blow people's minds. If I hadn't had this data, this would have sealed the deal on whether or not I had a problem. But so it tracks how many days I have not had a drink, but it also tracks, and I don't look at it very often anymore. I only use it for this, like to just prove this point.
I have one too. Yeah.
So 3 years, 3 months and 28 days and 22 hours as of right now, I have not, since I've had a drink. And then it tells me how much money I've saved. And I always say this is a super underestimate. Like I was being really conservative when I estimated how much money I spent. And right now,
I know, right?
Right now, as of today, it's telling me $14,568.
Yeah.
But this is the one, Ally, that really kills me. Time saved. So I think what I estimated was that I was spending, I can see it here, about 3 hours a day. Now, this isn't drinking. I wasn't necessarily drinking every day for 3 hours, but alcohol was kind of consuming me. So there'd be the time I spent drinking, which normally, depending, like some nights, maybe I only had a few glasses of wine. Other nights I would have had more wine. Like, depending on the night, I was probably drinking for at least an hour and a half, let's say, if time I was actually actively consuming, probably watching Netflix, folding laundry, doing whatever the hell else.
I know.
But I also was going to spend for sure at least a half an hour in the middle of the night awake thinking about drinking. I had incredible anxiety, which was one of the main reasons why I stopped drinking, was the anxiety that came with drinking for me was just nuts. I shouldn't use that word in the context of mental illness.
No, but you know, I know what you mean. It
really was just, it absolutely took over for me and I did not know how to manage it. I could not handle it. And it would get me up in the middle of the night. And oftentimes I'd literally have to get out of bed, physically go downstairs, turn some lights on, watch a show, drink some water, make some tea. And this is of course the time when I was famously Googling, am I an alcoholic? Which I did all the time. But you know, that's at least a half an hour, maybe an hour a night. And then the next morning I'm spending at least a half an hour beating the shit out of myself for the fact that I drank last night when I said I wasn't going to drink. So somehow I came up with this 3 hours a day, average time spent drinking or thinking about drinking. I have saved 3,642 hours in the last 3 years. That blows my mind. Like, and you know, I say to people like, what could you do with that time? And I don't know exactly what I've done with it, but I can tell you some of the things I've done with it. And I know you're going to tell me, because we're going to talk about running in a second, you're going to tell me what you've done with some of your time. But for me, that time is the most valuable resource that I've gotten back in that. First of all, I don't have the anxiety anymore, which is an amazing gift in itself, but I haven't had one shred of anxiety, surprise, surprise, since I stopped drinking alcohol, which is the prime reason for the anxiety. But that with that time, I mean, I have taken a coaching business that frankly, I was just letting slide. I was happy with just the status quo. I wasn't challenging myself. I wasn't taking any risks. I've taken that and turned it into something completely different in the last 3 years, which I'm very proud of. I started a podcast. I have, you know, I go to the gym most days. I've got, you know, I frankly spend more time with my teenagers than I ever thought I would spend with my teenagers. So many things are available to me with those extra 3 hours a day. Like how different could your life be if there were 3 hours a day that you were not consumed by thinking about a substance or actually using the substance? And I want to be clear too, Ally and I are talking about alcohol, but your thing might be something else. Everybody's got a thing. And your thing might be, you know, it might be Netflix, watching too much TV. It might be shopping. It might be food. It could be many, many different things, social media. But whatever that thing is, how much time are you spending doing that thing or thinking about that thing? Because that's the piece of the tracker that always blows my mind when I go in there and look at it. Like, this is just bonkers.
I know. It's so a number of things touching. I totally think that labeling, whether you choose to say you're an alcoholic or you choose not to use any term at all, I agree with you. I think that it does scare people. It definitely, because we do have this perception of what an alcoholic looks like. And, you know, it's somebody who wakes up and, you know, reaches over and grabs the vodka bottle and starts right away. And in some cases it is. For me, it works. And I feel like it maybe does a little bit to knock down the stigma surrounding it, that, you know,
totally
is an addictive substance. It's not to be played with lightly. If you have a problem with alcohol, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It is literally an addictive substance.
Yeah. And I totally applaud that. I think it's really important. And if the definition is one that you that resonates for you and that it feels good to you, and you can own it like that, and it can be a piece of your recovery and sobriety, then I think that's amazing.
But it's not for everyone. And I firmly believe too that there's no one path to recovery for everyone.
I
For
totally
me,
agree.
it's a number of different things. And, I am part of a recovery program, and I get a lot from that. I get a lot from my friends that friendships that I've cultivated among other sober women, because there is solidarity and empowerment in that. People who just kind of get that journey. But, we did talk about kind of what comes from having that extra time. Mm-hmm. And in that extra time, when I was stuck with those feelings and being like, oh my gosh, what are these emotions? You had to kind of figure out how to cope and what makes you happy. And what have I been doing for the last, 2 decades? Like, who am I? And it was shocking to see the amount of time that I got back. Yeah. Are you on Goodreads? I don't know if you heard of Goodreads app. It's like where you track the books you've read.
No, but I should be.
Okay, I'm going to send you a link.
Oh my God. I read there are like 65 books piled. I'm not joking, next to my bed right now.
So you need this. So I started to, when I was drinking, I barely read, which is wild, because I look back to when I was a child, and I would go to the libraries every Sunday with my dad, and we would walk back, and I'd have this massive bag full of books, and I'd sit in my room and just read for hours on end. And somewhere along the line, I just lost that. I lost the ability to do it. And I was numbing myself with alcohol, sitting in front of Netflix, folding laundry, hours wasted, barely exercise, would go to the gym. And anyway, so all to say is that since getting sober, I'm averaging like 40 books a year. And it's like, where did, so that's been a coping tool. But I also discovered running, and I say running saved me. And I remember a friend reached out. It was again during the year that mom was terminally ill. And she said, we talked about running a 5K race, and she messaged me and she said, you know what, let's do a half marathon. And I was like, you are wild. But anyway, signed up, and it allowed me to have routine. And I always thrive on routine. I like to kind of have a plan for the week. And I think that must have something to do with my anxiety and OCD. I just feel better when I'm structured, and I've thrived on that. I love it. It's absolutely a coping tool. But we spoke earlier, and I told you that I had injured myself after my last half marathon. And so for the last 2 weeks, I've been told to kind of, I haven't been able to run. And I texted my brother actually, and I said, so I think maybe I was using running as a substitute for my addiction. And he's like, are you just learning this now? And so I was like, I think I am just learning this now. And so, it's one of those strange gifts that you never asked for, where, in the middle of our third wave lockdown, here I am not having my favorite coping tool while, overseeing online learning for 2 kids and working full time. Yeah. But I'm stronger, we're stronger than we know. Right. And more resilient. And so it's been a real learning experience for sure. But it's, one of the things I've done over the last 2 weeks, and I told you about this as well, was I was reading Rich Roll's Finding Ultra. Yes. Which is, I'm never going to run an ultra, but it was.
Can you tell people who he is? He's an ultra.
Yeah. So sorry. Yes. Rich Roll is an ultra marathon, and he also has a podcast. And so he tells his story about how, in middle age, he basically, I think it was 40. It was his 40th birthday. He basically was like, I am not taking good care of myself. He had been sober for a number of years, but was in recovery from alcohol addiction. And he basically transformed his life, and kind of through this journey of athletic endurance feats, he talked about the process of just like finding your true character and actually seeing how resilient you can be, and what you can, the tough times that you can get through. And I think that's what I like about running, is that it does, test your character, and it tests your strength, both mental strength and physical strength. And because otherwise it's just, why would you put yourself through running?
Great question. Having run one full marathon, I would say this is my one and only full marathon I ever ran. I was like, and that will never happen again. You're saying it tests your mental strength and your, whatever. I was like, and your toenails, because I test you. But there's something he says in the book that stuck with me, is that when you get sober,
literally every decision you make and every choice you make following that will basically is going to determine whether you stay sober or not. And so I think about that daily in terms of what are the best decisions I need to make today to make sure that I continue on the right path, and how can I best set myself up for success. One thing I say too, and sorry if I'm rambling, it's just about the anxiety piece. You're right. My gosh, it's interesting as somebody with an anxiety disorder too. It's interesting how, so many people who have the same disorders use alcohol as self-medication. And there's a reason for it. I remember talking to a therapist a while back about how I was doing that. And she said, there's a reason people do it, because it works. It does. It works for that moment. Yeah. You're absolutely numbed out. You're not worrying, but then you pay for it the next day. You absolutely pay for it. And it becomes this vicious cycle where you're angry at yourself and you feel ashamed. But then you feel like the only thing that's going to help ease all of those feelings is alcohol. And I'm not obviously a scientist, but there's something about brain chemicals where you start to need more and more of that to kind of get that blissful feeling that alcohol is providing you. And hence that's where a lot of people end up. So there's no question that mental health and alcohol and addiction are absolutely linked.
Oh yeah, 100%. Sure. And when I talk about anxiety, just to be clear, when I'm talking about anxiety for me, it was circumstantial anxiety, 100% based on the fact I was drinking, there was no anxiety outside of that anxiety, but that anxiety around the alcohol became like everything. Like it was constantly there, and it was really, really hard to manage. And yes, drinking shut it down, but drinking also fueled it in an incredible way. And, in terms of the brain chemistry, and one of the things that's happening, and this is something I think I've probably said this on the podcast before, but it's something a lot of people don't understand is, a lot of women drink to manage anxiety and stress. And of course,
well, so we're told to do, right? Is that, pour yourself a glass of wine, you had a hard day,
Exactly. So the messaging is out there all the time, but also it works because alcohol is a depressant. So it slows down our brain, it numbs us, it gives us a slight break. And for about 20 minutes after we have that first glass of wine, we feel better. But it's also a stimulant. So it's not just a depressant, it's a depressant and a stimulant, because our brain, being the incredible organ that it is, immediately recognizes when it's been depressed and then goes instantly into active rebalancing mode. So wait a second, the brain, we've slowed down here. We've been depressed. How do we balance this out? Oh, I know. Let's pump out some stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol.
What are all the bad things we missed?
Let's pump out those things that jack us up and help us deal with the saber-toothed tiger. So what happens is, you come down for a bit, but then your brain tries to balance that back out. And those stress hormones, of course, the same hormones that are released through anxiety. So when you're anxious, your body is in fight or flight, it's in a stress state, and your body's producing those hormones. So it really is just adding fuel to the fire of anxiety to drink alcohol. It doesn't help. And then the other piece of it, which you so clearly articulated, is that it also, the next day, the conversation that you have with yourself also fuels that anxiety. So that just adds to it. So you've got this chemical fuel for the anxiety, and then you've also got the circumstantial fuel of beating yourself up and getting back into that, shame and blame place the next day. And then of course, that night, all you want to do is shut it down the next night. I don't want to hear this anymore.
That's right.
The cycle just repeats itself. So I have yet to meet one person who I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of women, and I've also talked to a lot of women just in the alcohol-free circles that I'm in, who has said that their anxiety has gotten way worse when they stop drinking. Yeah. So of course, if you have clinical anxiety and you do much better with medicine for that, great. I'm not suggesting that not drinking is going to solve everybody's anxiety problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't help.
Does not help.
Alcohol does not help.
That's our message.
I can't remember who said it, but maybe it was Laura McCown who said that alcohol was like pouring gasoline on your anxiety.
Yeah, that's
and it's very, very true. And and I'm very quick to say that too when I talk about how I self-medicated, and no, it's not like since I've stopped everything has been perfect, but I will tell you it is just worlds away from where it was.
Yeah.
My anxiety and OCD is manageable because I'm taking care of it, because I'm not, mixing alcohol with my actual medication that was prescribed by a doctor
Right.
that I'm lucky enough to have.
Probably says on the label, do not drink.
Of course it does. But was I gonna, listen to that? No. And I'm exercising, I'm eating better, I'm sleeping better. It all leads to other things. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've kind of wrapped your head around this, but I look back to how scared I was to lose alcohol. And it very much was like a relationship. Like I was breaking up with something that provided me with great comfort. That was a part of my daily life, sadly. And many people have asked, what it's been like. What has it been like since you kind of had that breakup? And I can't imagine, of course, there's been struggles and challenges. And it's hard when you live in a world that kind of pushes that message down your throat that life is better with alcohol. I have never been happier. I honestly have never been happier. I've never felt more like myself. I have deep, deep regret for the years I've lost, but I know you can't cling to that. You have to keep moving forward. But I have kind of open conversations with my kids as much as I can, based on their age, about it. Mm-hmm. And I just feel very lucky. And I think as part of this, I say a lot, there was this meme that was going around and it really, it stuck with me. It said, you didn't make good choices, you had good choices. And I believe that is the case for me. Yes, I did make those good choices, but I had them available to me. I am pretty privileged. I'm white, middle income, I'm housed, I have a strong support network. I was able to ask for help and I didn't have many things jeopardized because of that. And it's easier for me to come and share my story than it is for other people. And so my hope, part of my recovery is making sure that I do kind of provide service and help others who need it is that I think that desperately needs to change. We need to make sure that everybody has the ability to make those good choices for themselves, to have an opportunity and be presented with those options to get help.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. Really well said. On that note, maybe, sort of anyway, there are going to be women listening to this, I guarantee you, who are worried that they are drinking too much. And we're hopefully, knock on wood, coming to the end of this bloody pandemic. Mm. And what I do know about the pandemic, though, is that there's been a pandemic inside the pandemic this year, and that has been the increase in women's drinking over the last 12 months or so. And also women's burnout, which, they go hand in hand. What would you say to someone listening to this podcast in terms of what they could do as a first step?
I'd say, first off, be kind to yourself. Be really gentle to yourself right now, because this is so hard. We've never gone through something like this. This has been, an absolute upheaval of our lives. And we're trying to navigate things that we've never even fathomed having to do, working full time while also online schooling. We're constantly living in this fight and flight, mode. We're worried about our health and safety, that of our loved ones, whether our children's education is going to be impacted, whether we're going to have our jobs. So the first thing I'd say is be kind to yourself, because I know what it's like to beat yourself up for I'm drinking too much, or, I'm eating too much sugar, or I'm smoking too much weed, whatever it is. But on that note, if it is a concern, if you feel that inkling in your stomach that this is probably not serving me, this is probably not making things better, I would say to listen to that, because I can tell people that it is much better on the other side. Once you kind of fight to get there, it's not altogether easy and simple, but you have clarity that you don't have when you're avoiding it by using substances or, escaping it in other ways that just aren't benefiting you. And just also too, just leave the shame behind. It's there. People who are struggling these days, as you said, there has been an increase across the board. And again, there's a reason for that. It's very widely accepted. And the jokes that you see, even when Nova Scotia went into lockdown, I don't know how long, but 2 weeks ago, it was all I saw was pictures of alcohol, boxes of wine, glass of wine. Oh, I made it in time to the NSLC. it was just so normalized, and I get it. But I worry about the people who are using that as kind of a front to cover their problem. What I did, honestly, because it's really hard to sometimes people say, you know, ask for help or reach out, and it's hard, it's intimidating. And so I'd say reach out to somebody you trust. And
I always say talk to one person.
That's
like,
right. That's yes.
That's your first step. Like just one person, just talk to one person, and maybe it's, you know, maybe it's not somebody who can actively support you, but just share it with one person. I think is a really great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, you know, I would maybe add to that when you were talking about the pandemic, I was thinking, I've been doing all these corporate wellness presentations since last March, and they pretty much all start with the same phrase, which is just FYI, nobody is nailing this. Like nobody knows how to do it. And so, you know, I echo what you say about the self-compassion and just extending some grace to yourself. This has been a really challenging year. And even if we were outside of the pandemic and you were struggling with alcohol, I would say exactly the same thing. The most important thing in making a change in any behavior is to stop beating yourself up over it.
That's right.
And the other thing I would say is that it's really uncomfortable when you get to that place where you think to yourself, I'm not where I want to be with this. This isn't good. And probably you're taking some personal responsibility for it, which you should, by the way. And you're saying to yourself, okay, I kind of got myself here. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. And that always feels kind of crummy. But without that moment, there will never be any positive change. So do everything you can to just celebrate the fact that you're actually having this conversation with yourself, that you're actually thinking about this and wondering whether this might not be serving you anymore. And then go talk to one person, just share it with one person.
I love that one person thing. It's a very empowering moment, and it's a very scary moment, but you know, you have those moments to get the truth and the clarity that you need. And it's really scary, and it's going to be scary. But again, there's so much richness after. And I would have, the me 3 years ago would have hated me on the podcast right now. Like that's what I'm kind of thinking of, is like talking to the Allys of 3 years ago who are like, oh my God, let's self-righteous. Like, you know, she's running, she read 40 books. And it's like, sure. Like, and you know, but for sure I deserve some of that, but I never thought I would be that person or get there or find enjoyment in that and not be bored. And it's just it seems so simple. It's not, but there absolutely is life without alcohol. And as you talked about with the book club, like people don't really, like, it's not this big idea. Nobody's going to be, you know, I was ready for friends to be like so shocked, and, you know, but it was like, most people who care about you are going to be super supportive and, you know, want to be able to help and support you in any way. And the other thing I'd say too, really quickly, is that you don't owe anybody any explanation, because that's also a big fear, is like, what are people going to say if like, I don't have a glass of wine? You know, for me, I used excuses for the first while or like kind of half truths in terms of, you know what, wine's been making me really anxious lately. So I've just taken a step back, and then finally got to a point where I felt like I wanted to say, I've made a choice not to drink anymore, but really no's a one word answer.
Yeah, no absolutely should be enough. I like to shock people now by just letting them know that when they ask me why I don't drink, I say, because it makes me happy, which usually shuts people up, but it is the total truth. It just makes me so much happier not to drink. I am so happy that I finally realized I don't have to drink this thing.
Yeah. For
so long, I thought I had to drink it, and I was always going to have to drink it, both because I needed it, but also because I needed it. It's a thing, right? Like it's like a thing you do. Yeah. I don't need it. I don't want it, and it makes me happier not to drink it. And you know, there are so many unexpected, positive things or gifts that have become so obvious to me since I stopped drinking. You've touched on a few of yours, which, you know, the reading thing, I've said that before as well. Like one of the things that was just, I'd never thought about it until I hadn't had a drink for a long time, is that I had stopped reading before bed. I used to do it all the time. When you were talking about going to the library, I used to go to the library with my dad and mom, and we would get to pick out, like we had, I don't know what it was, like 10 books or 20 books or whatever a week. And we would go back every Saturday and we return the ones. And there was like storybook time at the library. You and I were probably there at the same time.
I know, eh?
Same thing. I was a reader all my life. I loved to read so much. I did my undergrad degree is in English. My dad was an English teacher. Like reading is just like, this was the center of my world for so long. And then it wasn't. And it wasn't because I was exhausted. And frankly, I'd always had a glass or two of wine. And
Yeah.
I could just,
you have to read the same paragraph.
I'd go to bed and I'd be like, oh my God, I just want to go to bed. Maybe I'd read this 5 pages 6 times and it would take me like, forever to finish a book. And now I just plow through it. I'm just like you. That was just one of the things. And I've talked about, there are so many other ones. I can't even list them all, but I echo your sentiment of it's actually really amazing on the other side. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, well, I don't know if I fall in Wendy's category. I don't know if I fall in Ally's category. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I would just say, don't worry about any of that. Are you happy? Is this thing serving you? Is this where you want to be? Would you like to drink less? If the answer is yes, I'd like to drink less. Great. Yeah. Celebrate that. That's a positive choice.
Yeah.
That is a positive choice. And this is the conversation we need to be having. It's actually a really great thing to say, hey, I'd like to drink less. And it's also a really great thing to say, I'd like to drink less, but it's harder than I thought.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's because this is the other piece that I struggle with a lot, is this idea that if it's not okay for it to be hard to stop drinking unless you are an addict or an alcoholic. And again, those words, I agree with you. Like, was I addicted to alcohol? You betcha. Right. So I'm not suggesting that wasn't there, but for a lot of women,
it's a personal choice. The
words are just a barrier. Right. And so they're thinking
100%.
I don't think I am an alcoholic, or maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But, and so if I'm not an alcoholic, then this should be easy. And it's never going to be easy, you guys, because alcohol is an addictive substance and everybody who drinks it builds a tolerance to it. The more you drink it, the better your liver gets at processing it. The more you need to drink to get the same feeling. There's all this stuff going on in your brain chemically as you build up that tolerance. So it's going to be hard. It was never going to be easy. If it wasn't addictive, it would be a lot easier, but it is an addictive substance. And it's not just addictive for some people, it's addictive for everybody. Addictive substance. So it is okay that it's hard, and it is okay to ask for help. It is okay to seek out other communities of women who are trying to change their relationship with alcohol. It's okay to go to a recovery meeting. It's okay to call a coach. It's okay to do all of those things.
Or a combination, that's
exactly. Some combination of all of those things. It's totally okay to do that. And it doesn't matter what category you fall into. We now use the alcohol use disorder spectrum. We don't even use the definition of alcoholic anymore as a diagnosis. So the alcohol use disorder spectrum is exactly that. It is a spectrum. And you can be anywhere on that spectrum. The only thing I care about is whether you want to be drinking less or not. That's the only thing I care about. Wherever you are on that spectrum, would you like to drink less or maybe not at all? And if that's the case, if you're thinking to yourself, this is taking more than it's giving, I'm not really happy with this. And frankly, the other thing I want to say is maybe at one point it did serve you. Maybe at one point it wasn't a problem. Maybe at one point it did make you happy. The only thing that matters is where are you right now with it? And what do you want right now? So anyway, that's how to get off my soapbox now.
I know, I agree with all of that. And, the other thing too, I'd say is that one of the best things I did, and I would encourage listeners to do, is just check out some vocal, sober women on Instagram. I got a lot of motivation, and I dropped a lot of excitement from that. It's just like, wow, this is like an incredibly strong, creative, someone who looks like she's like actually happy without alcohol, so I check out some of those voices, learn from them, read some books, it does change your perspective in terms of what life can be like. And I remember thinking when I quit, like, my gosh, like I'm not going to have champagne at my children's wedding, or, and for a lot of people, that's like, don't even look that far away. But, I thought I'll never have, a glass of red wine with my husband, on our trip to Italy. And now I'm like, I'm going to be in Italy if I forget there. I'm going to be sitting down. Am I really worried about a beverage? Like, it's just, it's shifted my perspective, and I'm blessed to have gotten to this point, and it takes a while.
Well, you have to leave some space for that too, because it does take a while. At the beginning. It absolutely feels like that in the beginning, but you have no idea how you're going to feel in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 3 years, 3 months, and 20 whatever days I am right now. I feel very, very different about it than I did several years ago. And I've been to Italy and not drank alcohol.
And you loved it, right?
I had the best trip ever. And, when I think ahead to my children's wedding, it hasn't even crossed my mind, the champagne, question, to be honest, which is interesting because if I had that thought years ago, it would have crossed my mind, right? When I was in the early stages of this, but now it's just the fact that I wasn't thinking about my kids' weddings, obviously. You are clearly a planner because...
I think it was, I was scrambling for excuses like, God, in 20 years, one of my children might get married.
Okay. This was keep drinking. This was a reason to keep drinking.
I got to keep going.
Got it. Yeah. Anyway, wherever you are on the spectrum, whatever, and if you're not there, great. If you're happy with your relationship with alcohol, awesome. I too have most of my friends drink, and for them, it is not a problem, or at least that I know of, it's not a problem. Fantastic. But if there's someone in your life who's struggling with this, or you are starting to question your own relationship with alcohol, the first step is to just celebrate the fact, I think, that you're becoming aware of it. And then all you need to do is take one small step. You don't need to do it all at once. You just need to take one small step. And I think Ally and I both agree that maybe just talking to one person might be a great place to start. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast and you need resources or support, reach out to me. I can point you in the right direction. If I'm not the right person to help you, I can point you to a place that might be. I can connect you with some of these people that Ally's talking about in terms of these sober women or communities where for sober curious women, I can help you find a place to get started. Well, listen, Ally, I knew this was going to be a good conversation. I'm sad that it's over. I actually kept you a few minutes longer than I usually do, but I was just having so much fun listening to you. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story with us today, and also all the insight that you have around the issues with women's drinking and mental health and all the rest of it. It's been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this too. And I also offer, I don't know what the kids say these days, my DMs are open, but I'm also more than happy to have a conversation with anyone who might be, feeling like to talk this out. And thanks again for the platform that you have, Wendy. It's a phenomenal service to many women.
Yeah, well, I love doing what I do here. Can I ask you, do you want to share anywhere where people can get in touch with you, or?
Oh yeah, sure. I think my Instagram is @Ally Garber. So ALLYGARBER. And that's probably the easiest way if you have Instagram.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say Instagram? Yeah, Instagram.
Yeah, you did. And Ally's really funny too, you guys. So you'll enjoy her. I enjoy her. She's in
a lot of dad jokes.
I love her posts. So yeah, that's @Ally Garber on Instagram. All right. Well, thanks, Ally. It's been awesome. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.